Gen Z is not going to fight for Israel. It's not happening. Give it up. Forget about it. In fact, they're much more likely to start a revolution and overthrow the US government at this point than they'll ever be likely to willingly go to war for Israel. I'm Philosophical Gamer, the Millennial defense lawyer for Gen Z, and you guys can consider this video to be an open letter on behalf of Gen Z to the US government, the US military, the president, whomever is in charge of these decisions. I'm telling you guys right now, don't waste your time trying to draft young men today into fighting your wars. It's a total lost cause. At best, you'll be totally wasting all your precious time and resources, and at worst, you might just spur them into a full-on revolution as they're clearly already at a breaking point right now. Now, before we can even get to the topic of Israel, and trust me, that's going to be a juicy one, let's start with the fact that you're not even going to get Gen Z to even fight for America right now at this point. Forget a foreign country. Patriotism is totally dead right now, and I'd say rightfully so. Now, maybe there is a slight bit still left lingering within older generations, but with Gen Z, literally no one is proud to be an American anymore at this point. In fact, a good percentage of them actually want to leave, and I'd say for good reason. The US government has been rapidly losing their legitimacy for the past few decades now, and this current administration is totally speedrunning the process, to say the least.
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody.
If no one even wants to live in your country anymore, if they all see your country as a total joke, and rightfully so, there is no way in hell you're gonna get anyone to pick up a gun, risk their lives, and die for your country. Now, you can try to compel them to do so through force, through a draft, as you've quote-unquote not ruled it out yet. But I'm here to tell you that would be a total and absolute disaster. They say that history rhymes, but it doesn't necessarily exactly repeat. And ironically, for as much as we like to criticize the baby boomers here on this channel, this might be the one time where I'm going to say we could actually learn something positive even from them. Oh, wow. Okay, I feel like I just threw up in my mouth saying that, but in this one particular instance, it's true. You all know what's coming next here. We're going to talk about the Vietnam War. Now, up until the Vietnam War, America had essentially been undefeated in wars in its entire history. The American Revolution, the Civil War, and of course, World War I and II. America was on an absolute unstoppable, undefeated streak. So given that they had literally just defeated every major world power, the Vietnam War seemed like it was going to be a foregone conclusion. The world's most powerful army going up against an impoverished, developing nation that hadn't even fully industrialized yet. Yeah, seems like it should be an easy win right here, only as we all know, that isn't what ended up happening at all. Instead, it ended up being a very costly, unpopular, and humiliating defeat for the world's biggest superpower. Now, all the reasons the US lost the Vietnam War are complicated, to say the least. But it's pretty safe to say that one of the main ones was its extreme unpopularity amongst the American public, especially amongst baby boomers back then who vehemently protested against it. But furthermore, they went to all sorts of desperate measures to deliberately dodge the draft. No one wanted to fight this war, and as a result, the US military was extremely weakened throughout this campaign. Now, if you compare this to World War I and II, where young men were actually motivated and enthusiastic to fight for their country, it was seen as a noble cause, and veterans were actually treated with basic respect and dignity. So it's no wonder why the two wars had such radically different outcomes. Back then, young men had good jobs, houses, wives, families to fight for. And now you've taken all that away from them and more. And yeah, you can pretty much dream on about any of them willing to fight for a country that has done nothing but screw them over, betray them, and best of all, still gaslight them into thinking it's their own fault. Though thankfully, due to channels like my own, they're not really buying that anymore. Here's one thing that the US government and military definitely does not want you to know. Evading the draft is technically illegal, but it is insanely hard to enforce if everyone doesn't want to do it. During the Vietnam War, it's estimated that 570,000 young men committed some sort of draft violation, but only 8,750 were convicted, and an even fewer 3,250 were actually jailed for it. Do the math and you'll see that this isn't even close to the 1% that they were actually able to legally punish for evading the draft. And the reason for this is very simple. The Justice Department simply does not have the resources nor the manpower to chase after this many millions of people in mass. And in this era, with this generation, it's going to be even infinitely harder to do this now. A significant percentage of Gen Z already want to leave the country as is, before any draft, any war, any threat of losing their lives. They're already fleeing in mass because unlike past generations, they've seen the American dream is nothing but a joke and an illusion. The jig is up. The patriotism brainwashing that worked on previous generations just isn't working anymore. Rising living costs, diminishing job opportunities, the skyrocketing cost of buying a house or starting a family. These have all led to a collective online sentiment that the new American dream is to leave. They already want to leave before you even started talking about a war, due to just everyday basic survival being so damn difficult. And if you were to actually initiate a full-on draft, I can absolutely 100% promise you'll see a mass youth exodus the very next day. Now, being the millennial Gen Z defense lawyer, I've had the privilege and opportunity of talking to many young people struggling every day in this god-awful American economy. And a lot of them already want to leave just like I did, but they say the one thing holding them back is simply fear. Making such a big radical change like moving abroad is undoubtedly terrifying and challenging for most people. Leaving behind your friends and family, your pets, everything you've known your whole life. It can be pretty daunting even if you want to leave really badly. That's really the only thing keeping America from a full-on demographic collapse right this instant. But if you were to implement a draft, if you were to try to send them to war, this would absolutely push them over the edge, as they'd have nothing to lose at that point anyways. If you're going to be sent away from your friends, family, and everything you've known your whole life anyways, might as well voluntarily move to the country of your choice instead of forcibly being sent into a war zone to die for a country that never gave a lick about you in the first place. So if anyone in the US government or military is watching this, I'm telling you this for your own sake. Don't waste your time. You're already concerned about no new babies being born, about a shrinking population. If you ever implemented a draft, you'd instantly lose all your young adults on top of your current birth rate crisis. This would turn the gradual population collapse into an instant and immediate population apocalypse. Alright, so before we get to the topic of Israel, I think it's important to first point out that whatever you think of their government, whatever side you're on politically, don't be a dick to the people. Most people from Israel, America, or any country for that matter, are not bad people, and they don't necessarily support the horrible actions of their governments. We're talking about the governments here and not the people. Now, it's no secret that Gen Z is by far the most pro-Palestine, anti-generation in the world today. So even if you somehow got over the hurdle of getting them to fight for America in any capacity, which is already an impossible task given how much America has screwed them over, you're definitely never in a million years going to get them to fight for Israel. Gen Z may get relentlessly mocked for being the social media generation by boomers, but as their defense lawyer, I have a bit of a different perspective on this. Their social media savviness makes them the most immune to propaganda generation by far. It's a bit funny and ironic how much sheer projection the United States does when it comes to the issue of propaganda. Growing up, you constantly get shoved down your throat how this is just CCP propaganda, or how that is just Russian propaganda, or how this other thing is just communist propaganda. And I'm sure they are. I'm sure every major world power has their own propaganda and their own narrative that they want to push. But what you realize after traveling the world and growing up for a while is that America is just as, if not far more guilty of spreading their own propaganda as any country they accuse of spreading propaganda. And there's probably no better example of this than Israel. Due to all the billions of dollars flowing in from Israel and AIPAC to take over American politics, they need you to like and support Israel. They want you to care more about Israel than your own life in America. They're constantly cutting food stamps and benefits for American citizens, preaching fiscal responsibilities, and making up excuses as to why we can't afford it. And yet, whenever Israel needs billions of dollars in financial aid, suddenly all the money appears out of thin air magically, and we could just magically afford everything. Now, in the pre-social media era, American propaganda was very effective. Information was heavily gatekept through a select few elite government institutions, and as a result, you only heard the narrative the US government wanted you to hear, and you couldn't really question it at all without being totally socially outcast. But this kind of all ended with Gen Z perfecting the social media age. Anyone can share an opinion now, information is far more readily available, people can draw their own conclusions and make up their own minds, free from the influence of American propaganda. Your propaganda is just straight up not going to work on Gen Z. In fact, your relentless, aggressive propaganda is even starting to backfire at this point. We've already seen this with how much more pro-China they are, despite endless, infinite anti-Chinese propaganda from the American government. One comment I saw on a video about this really perfectly encapsulated the situation. It went something along the lines of, I don't necessarily love China, I just don't hate them as much as the US government wants me to. And I think a very similar sentiment applies to Israel here. To be clear, there are a lot of young people who do just straight up hate Israel right now, but I think a lot of them don't necessarily even hate Israel. They just don't love Israel as much as the US government wants them to. They just don't love Israel to the extent that they want all their hard-earned tax dollars to go to them, while so many people are starving and homeless in the United States right now. They just don't love Israel to the extent that they literally go to war and fight for them. And the more you obsessively and aggressively constantly shove this propaganda down their throats, the more they're going to resist. Because let's face it, everyone is just sick of hearing it at this point. America propaganda just isn't working the way it used to anymore. So where does this all leave us, and where do we go from here? As I already mentioned in the beginning of the video, I believe Gen Z is already on the brink of an all-out revolution right now. In fact, in many places, it's already happened. And in some ways, we're already seeing the early signs of it in America right now as we speak. With the insane, sudden surge in warehouse fires and political violence we've seen over the past few months and years, we're already currently at the tipping point right now. Young people have been so vehemently pushed to the limit that one slight breeze in the wrong direction could really tip the entire thing over. And you know what would really be the perfect catalyst for that? A mandatory military draft forcing young men to fight for Israel. Gen Z has already staged a number of violent, game-changing revolutions all around the world. And as their defense lawyer who knows them very well, I can confidently tell you all this. You've already taken away their jobs, their economic prospects, their futures, and your country is already literally burning down right now as a result. The only thing left they have is the fact that they have some semblance of freedom, safety, and life left. A mandatory military draft would threaten all of that and create backlash to levels hitherto undreamt of. At that point, they would much more likely to risk their lives fighting the US government to avoid going to war than fighting for the US government in a war to support Israel. This would be the one catalyst to push them over the edge, as they would have literally nothing to lose anymore at that point. And if you've studied any history at all, or if you just know any basic common sense about human nature at all, you'll know that there's nothing more dangerous than millions of disenfranchised young men with nothing to lose. I get that sunk cost fallacy is a thing. I get that if you're the US government or military, yeah, it probably sucks that you've spent billions upon billions of dollars and endless amounts of time pushing pro-Israel propaganda, only to see it totally backfire in spectacular fashion amongst young people. But there are times in life still in which the wise decision is to simply cut your losses and change your strategy, and this is undoubtedly one of them. If you want to gain the support of young people again, start by fixing things at home first. Fix the economy, give them decent jobs and opportunities again, and at least try to pretend to give a shit about them again.
I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody.
We all know you don't actually give a shit about anyone but yourselves, but you're going to actually have to make an effort to at least pretend like you care, to gain the respect and support of the youth again. They're not going to be brainwashed into working for your horrible low wages. They're not going to be brainwashed into buying into your failure of a system. And they're most certainly not going to be brainwashed into fighting for a country that never gave a shit about them in the first place. Signed, the philosophical gamer, the millennial Gen Z